Hello, everyone. Welcome to the awesome day of FileMaker Training. I'm Richard Carlton here at FM Training. Oh, there I am at FM Training headquarters, where every day is a great day. We're using the FileMaker platform to move our business and our organizations forward. I'm going to adjust my camera just a smidge. There we go. We have some upcoming broadcast events that are coming up after JavaScript. So after JavaScript is doing great, this week is another free week. Next week will be one day of free training on Monday to kind of clean things up. And then we will be starting the paid training Monday afternoon. So Leland gets to do like 3 hours of training. He's going to be really hung over and screwed up by the end of Monday. But he offered to do it, and I wasn't going to say no because I know how much of you, all you folks, love his training. As a reminder, we're going to be doing the React Native training. This is a official statement for those of you. If you go to fmtraining.tv, go to the top of the page. When I hit the button, it always scrolls to the bottom, but you go to the top of the page, FM Train TV, press hit that button there, hit this button right here. The JavaScript training, it comes to this page right here. So this is the information on the live free training. If you click over here, you can register for it to remind you what's going on. And so the free training will be today, tomorrow, Friday, Monday at 1 o'clock, this time slot, then Monday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. After it's over, if you have paid for that training, you will get a confirmation email. We'll resend that email on Sunday to remind everyone the Zoom link that you will use to log in on it. You press the button right here. You can log in or actually see all the free videos that we have so far. I know they're working on day 5 right now. And so this is where you can watch all the recorded videos so far. These are all the videos through last week. And so the day 4, then really today, Monday was day 5, yesterday was day 6, today's day 7 of 8, 9, 10 days total of free JavaScript training. So what's really cool is that we're going to have paid training that will be down below here. It'll be accessible if you paid for it. Once again, the whole point of the JavaScript is this day was really basic, but it's baby steps, then bigger steps, then crawling. Crawling before you walk, baby steps, then you learn to run. And so that's kind of what we've been doing progressively. Some of you here, the training is really targeted towards, I would say, the intermediate group here, or maybe people haven't done JavaScript before with the FileMaker platform. And so we're targeting kind of intermediate developers to get them up to the next stage, at least in terms of JavaScript. The JavaScript with FileMaker gives you some tremendous additional capabilities. In fact, I am working on a project management little internal tool, kind of based on some stuff that Kyle Williams has done. And I had to get Kyle to help me out for a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, updating his demo file. And then I'm rolling it into kind of our little project management, kind of really simple document management solution. We're going to give that away like a week or in a couple weeks. It's on the schedule. But basically, I was going through Kyle Williams's JavaScript, and I could recognize and understand what was going on because I sat through Leland Long's training on JavaScript. So for me, I don't have a history with JavaScript. For me, it's just kind of, it's the hot new thing, the hot flavor of the month. Although it's been around for a while, it's probably not going to go anywhere. And so if you learn JavaScript, you can do quite a few things with FileMaker with it. You can also build executable apps for iPhone and iPad, and that's where the paid training comes in. So if you want to build an application that works on iPhone or iPad, once again, this is kind of the pro code version of building a solution where you need, users to access it. You don't want to be worried about really licensing constraints of that application with Claris, etc. But that application can still talk to FileMaker Server to get data out of it through the data API. And when you buy FileMaker Server, you pay the data usage on the data API. It's pretty inexpensive. But that's how Claris makes a little bit of money on that kind of deal. So you could build with JavaScript a React Native application. It can be compiled to iPhone. It can be put on the Apple App Store, or you can actually load it, test it on the Android device, and load it on the Google Marketplace. So you get kind of a really cool solution because that's what the paid training is. So that's what Leland's going to be working on. So Leland's going to pick up the conversation today.
Today, we're working with a new JavaScript library. Last couple of days, we worked with jQuery. We're advancing.
Okay, good. Cool.
Yeah.
All righty. So, take it away. Off we go.
Very good. Okay. So like I already mentioned, last couple of days, what I like to term JavaScript 102 was all about jQuery and some different things we could do with it. Today, we move on to a new demo file, PDFEditor. If you haven't downloaded it already, feel free to, either now or later. And this one's a little interesting because it's in two parts. Number one, the first part is the JavaScript training, which is what we're going to go through here in the next 3 or 4 days, step by step, helping you to create this PDF editor from scratch. And I'm going to go ahead and demo the full running version of the PDF editor now, just so you can see what it is that we're going to be building. And I suppose the one thing that I was noticing that's rather interesting in this particular solution is this solution, all of these buttons, all of this functionality, all works with 0 records in the database. So talk about interesting context for web viewers, right, Richard?
I'm sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the found set. Whenever you see things working with 0 found set, I always get nervous that somehow I'm not seeing the screen correctly, right? So,
right. So for instance, over here on the right, we have a question mark. And if you tap on that, it'll give you some basic instructions of how to use this thing. First off, you start with one of these 2 buttons here, which are located in the top center of the screen. And once you've selected one of those, then the set of tools over here on the left can allow you to add and edit and do whatnot. And there's a button that's hidden underneath this pop-up right here, and that allows you to do some more functionality. So that question mark can bring up a pop-up window that will help initially help you understand where to start and what to do. Now, the one thing to note, I mentioned this in the previous class, is that what you're staring at is the 2 large white spaces are web viewers. We actually have 3 web viewers on this window, and we'll go through what those mean and the difference between them. But in Windows, I believe it's still an issue when you try to have a pop-up window like this over on top of a web viewer. So if you're using this in Windows and if your pop-ups are not being very friendly, most of these buttons are all pop-up windows. You might just need to manage your real estate. Go into layout mode, make the web viewers smaller, move them around, fine-tune it to however you wish. This is fine-tuned for a Mac, unfortunately, with pop-up windows all over the place. So that's just kind of a gotcha with the Windows customers out there that it'll still work for you, but there's a problem with the screen with pop-up windows trying to sit on top of a web viewer. So with that, one of these 2 buttons we'll start with up here. The first one is to create a new one. The second one is to load an existing. So we're just going to hit, you'll notice right here it says page 0 of 0. I'm going to hit this plus sign, and voila, we have a new PDF in both windows. And you can see the standard browser controls that come up. If I scroll around in the window, you can kind of see the edges show up. This is a PDF being rendered by the underlying browser. So in this case, Safari, right? But now we have page 1 of 1. So what we've got now is a PDF in code rendered in these 2 web viewers with a final PDF down here that's in a container. So that's actually an actual file we could export and open right now, but right now we just be a blank page, right? So in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll notice I have a note that in coordinate systems on a PDF, the bottom left corner is your 0, 0. So X is 0, Y is 0. In the upper right, this shows you that this particular page size is approximately 596 units or pixels wide by 842 pixels tall. So that gives you an idea when later you have to pick an X and a Y position. That'll give you kind of an idea of how to guess. If you want dead center, you're going to pick half of that value and half of that value, right, to be approximately in the center. And we'll go over that here in a minute, but I'm kind of showing you what you're staring at here. But we've got one page out of one page. Moving on, we've got one blank page here. Let's do something with it. So this top button allows us to add some text. I've put in the text watermark here, and I've got a position, X and Y position. I put in a rotation of 30 degrees and opacity of 25%. We got a color here. We got a font. We got a size. We got a line height. Let's just hit the check mark and see what happens. And there's our watermark going across with a specified color and a specified location with a specified opacity. Now, as you know, you can't do that natively in FileMaker, right? Every PDF you can generate within the FileMaker system has to be on a layout. And so you can design your layout to look however you wish. So you could take another program and create an opaque watermark with text and import that as an image into your FileMaker layout. And yes, you could print it out and have a PDF that looks like that, but that's a bit of extra work, right? I think this is probably a little simpler. So already you're starting to see some possible benefits of why you might want to use this PDF editor and or make it yourself. So that was some text. The next option is an image. So I've already pre-populated some beginning numbers. It's a PNG file. This is a container, so I dropped it in there from the Finder. Given it some values, I hit plus, and now we have the watermark and an image on there that's actually been rotated.
Oh yeah, okay.
And we have the possibility to make rectangles and squares. So there's one. Here's an oval. Let's change the color of the oval this time. Let's make that a nice, pretty bright red. And we'll click OK and hit check mark. And now we have an oval kind of sitting in the same position, you can tell. And last but not least, we have the ability to add a line, and we'll just throw a line on there. So that's what the 5 different tools on the left-hand side can do. PDF editor. We've done 5 different edits to this one particular page. Let's do something a little bit more interesting. Let's add a new page. Richard, pick a size, letter, legal, or A7.
I like Alpha 7 would be excellent.
So we're going to add a page, size A7, to the rear of the document. We're going to hit plus, and now we have one of 2 pages here. And if we scroll over here, here's a preview of our all pages. And it looks funky because this was a letter size and that's an A7. So over here, I can go back and forth between page 1 and page 2. And of course, this, if you have lots of pages, this goes to the last, this goes to the previous. So that's what all these controls are doing. And on page 2 here, we might just quickly add the edge of a very large rectangle, so that now over here you can kind of see what's going on. And part of the reason for that edge is because this size is a lot smaller, right? Instead of 500 or so across and 800 tall, this is a lot smaller. So when I added the rectangle with a X and Y position and width and height, it drew right off the screen. So that should be obvious content, or obvious to those of you that do this sort of thing. But that's the particulars of why it looks kind of funky and not a proper rectangle. So now let's go ahead and add a letter also. Let's do this one in the middle. This is one of the reasons I actually created this PDF editor. Is I needed the ability. FileMaker has the ability to append a document to the end of a PDF, but you can't insert one into the middle somewhere. So we've got page 1 and 2. I'm going to insert a blank letter right after page 1. So that's going to insert right between 1 and 2. And now if we scroll here, you can see 1, 2 is now blank, and 3 is now our what used to be page 2 A7. So the only button I have not covered here on this screen is the middle one, and this is the ability to load an existing PDF. You just take it, drag it into this container. I've already populated one in there. I'm going to hit plus, and now I have a 3-page demo PDF that I grabbed off the internet somewhere, an employment verification form for apartment rental. So now that I've got that PDF loaded here, now I can do the same thing I've been doing before. I can add a watermark right to the page 1. And you'll notice it only affects the current page that I'm working on right here. And so whether you're creating a new one or bringing in an existing PDF, you can edit it to your heart's content. So that's what we're building, and that's what it looks like, and that's what the demo file will allow you to do right out of the gate without any coding whatsoever. Do you like it? Do you love it? Oh, one thing we didn't do is take a look at this final PDF. If I right-click here, export that container to my downloads folder, tell it to automatically open, replace the one I already have there. It's going to open it in preview.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. How do we get it out? Yeah. So
yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's our container that holds the finished PDF the entire time we're working on it. Okay. So now that you see what it is that we're doing, now let's go spend the next few days building that thing from scratch. So we're going to start here at section 1. And we're going to start simple. And if you've been watching on previous classes, a lot of this should look pretty standard, like a template.
Oh yeah, I recognize this.
Yeah. So step 1, if you're creating this yourself, would be to add a web viewer right here, this nice little white box. And we're going to name it web viewer with giving it a blank address. Step 2 is to add a second web viewer. That's the one I have over here on the left. That one I've named webviewer.preview. And again, it's an empty address. Step 3, we have a couple scripts to look at. So we're going to do that next. And just to be, let's go ahead and run it just to see what it does. We're going to hit the init button. You're probably familiar with that does. That gets all of our pieces and parts and custom JavaScript and libraries and everything all populated into this little tiny PDF up here in the corner. That's our working web viewer. I threw in some text. Our JS runs in here just so that you can kind of see, oh yeah, okay, the init button populates that web viewer with stuff. This one is still empty. Now, if I hit run, what it's going to do is it's going to run a JavaScript function that you'll see shortly that's currently lurking in this web viewer right up
Yeah, I was
here.
about to say it's running in there, then it's going to kick it out in here, right? Something like that. Yes.
Yes, because when it's done doing its work, it's going to send back its results to FileMaker. And the results from FileMaker, as you'll see in the scripts, is going to populate this web viewer. So I'll hit run, and there it is. It's a brand new PDF, one page, and we added some text, and that's all it does. And now we're going to go see what all it takes to do that. Okay.
Okay. Was it just me
One
or
little,
was that really slow, or was it a really big PDF? I mean, it seemed like it took a while.
let me hit a knit. Well, let me go into layout mode, browse mode, clear all the web viewers, right? I'm going to hit a knit, and that pops up, and now it's just sitting idle.
Yep. Yep.
Now it's just sitting idle. When I click the run button,
Yep.
Boom.
Oh, okay. I thought that you'd clicked it. We were waiting and waiting and waiting, and then suddenly it popped up here. So yeah, no, that's pretty quick.
No,
pretty quick.
Yeah. Every time you click the button, it's very, very quick.
All right. So was a question from Duggan Ingen. He wants to know about Alpha 4 format for Europe. You should be able to set up the format on your other demo over here without too much problem, right? The other demo size for the PDFs. Remember,
as far as the PDF size, I picked letter, legal, and A7. There's a lot more choices to pick from. Those are just 3 that I grabbed, and we will look at that option later. Yes.
Cool.
Good question.
Right, cool.
Up until now, what is this? This is day 7. I've been using nothing but FileMaker's insert text giant calc window thing to do all the JavaScript work in, right? Today, I'm going to introduce an optional tool that may or may not make our lives easier. It's a new tool. Here it is here on the screen. This is Safari, and this is the web page for Microsoft's Visual Studio Code. It's a free product. You can use it only if you're using Mac, Windows, or Linux. So if you're using any other than that, that's kind of a joke. What else is there, right? So you can download your flavor, your version here of Visual Studio Code if you wish. It's not required. But you're going to see me using it for the next few days for editing our PDF code. So I've got it up and running here on my screen, and I've got 2 windows divided mostly because I'm going to be showing you things kind of step by step on the left, and over on the right is the completed what we're working towards. So this kind of gives you a nice little glimpse of side by side the completed code, and then we're going to go through line by line over here on the left. Okay. So with those tools in place, let's go to FileMaker and look at these scripts 1.1 through 1.6. And that is these right here. If you're familiar with the other demo files, you notice this looks very similar. By the way, all of the finished editor scripts are all down here at the bottom. So if you're looking to dive right on into that editor and just look at tear it apart and figure out how it works, that's where all those scripts are. And all the rest of these in here are all the step-by-step JavaScript instructions. Richard, did you have a question?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that in there somewhere would be the A4, A5, A whatever stuff in there, the PDF, right?
That'll be in documentation that you'll see shortly.
Okay, cool.
Okay, in this very first script, this is where we do the same thing that we do with jQuery, which is we're going to start by splitting all of these things into separate units, where later we're going to combine them all into one. So the very first thing we do is we go out and we grab our external library. And the last one was split into 5 parts. This one's split into 19. It's a little bigger library. Okay. So this library is split into 19 parts. And right here, I'm combining them all together into one variable. And then the script exit with the contents of that variable. So how did I get all of this code, you ask? Well, let's go take a look. As we covered with jQuery, I actually grabbed that code from the CDN, the content content delivery network. Here's a link here in the script for you to look at that if you wish. There's also a link for the NPN section if you want to look at that. In the GitHub section, the other thing we're going to look at today is the actual library website. And that's this one here. This is the page that totally describes everything about it. This is where you can get it. This is where you can understand the API. This is the main website, just like we were looking at jQuery. And if I tap here on API, this is where we can start to look at all of the options and objects that it has. And for each particular object over here on the right is all the methods and properties for it. It's an extensive library, and we're only going to be using some of it. Okay. But the interesting thing to note is, like it says here at the very first page, this is a library that's been around a while, and its purpose is to create and modify PDF documents in any JavaScript environment. Sound familiar? We now have basically a FileMaker JavaScript environment. So that's what I've done is I've taken this, ran with it in the FileMaker environment and made this library available for us to use. And now we're going to learn some baby steps on how to use this. This is the entire library shoved into 19 elements. This one combines them all, and this one shoots it out. Same thing we did for jQuery, just a little bigger. Okay.
Okay.
The next one is our custom JavaScript. It's the same thing that you've seen before to here. We're going to insert one line of JavaScript. We'll look at it here shortly, and we exit with it. Now, what I've done in this particular demo file is below the working code is a JavaScript walkthrough. It's an explanation of what you're going to see. And this is split out line by line with some what and why are you doing it and some reference material if you want to dive deeper. Because today you are going to be drinking from a large water hose. You are not going to understand everything I say as I say it. And so this is going to help you later when you go to dissect it and try to wrap your head around it to help you go in a little deeper. We can only teach you so fast. And in order to get this PDF editor up and running, you're just going to have to drink from a fire hose and kind of nod your head going, okay, I think I understand what he just said, and move on. If we took our time with every single line, this would not be a 3 or 4 day class. This would be a 20 or 40 day class. So there's some type of learning where you just kind of have to go out and do it, right? Do it and then spend time later going back and trying to understand it. So that's kind of the mode we're in at this stage. Okay, so this is going to be our JavaScript that we're going to use. First was the library, next was the JavaScript. This should look familiar to you if you've been to previous classes. This is my HTML template, short and sweet, some basic boilerplate, and we've got 2 sections that we're going to substitute and throw the entire library in between those tags and my custom JavaScript between those tags. You'll notice this is the div on the screen that you actually see. RJS runs in here.
Okay.
And the other stuff is just the boilerplate that you've seen before. Okay. Next, this is the one that puts them all together. So this grabs the library, pulls it into a variable. This grabs our JavaScript, pulls it into a variable. This grabs our HTML template, puts it in a variable. This compiles them all together with substitution so that we substitute the funky placeholders with the actual code. All of this should look familiar. Done it all before. And this is finally where we set our web viewer with the contents of all of that. Okay. So we did that in 4 scripts. From here on out, we're just going to do it in 1. But I like to split it out first just so you kind of can chew on why this script, for example, is so busy rather than our big, really big, trying to dissect a really big script when you're starting out is kind of a little overkill, isn't it?
Okay.
So that's our library, that's our JavaScript, that's our template, that's populating our web viewer. The last 2 should be obvious to you what they do because we've been doing it in the past, which is this script is tied to the button. This is what's going to run a specific function that's in JavaScript sitting idle in our web viewer, right? After we click on it, it's just sitting there waiting to be called. This is what actually calls it. We do some basic error checking in case we call it in the wrong order. And then when the JavaScript's all done, it's going to call this script and pass all of the information back to FileMaker. So we grab it here in a script parameter. And then we dump the entire contents of what we get back into our other web viewer. Just raw. We just dump the entire contents in there and our browser renders the final PDF. So that's all the pieces and parts. We've explained absolutely everything except for the code. And that's what's next. Okay. The JavaScript code that actually did all that. Here's what it looks like. Kind of short and sweet. I'm going to copy that and paste it over in Visual Studio Code right here on the right. Now you'll notice what Visual Studio Code does for us. It colorizes everything, right? So that's the first thing that it does. And as we edit, it's also going to handle all of the indenting and some type ahead. So that's one of the advantages to moving to Visual Studio Code. Again, it's optional. It's not required. You can type the whole thing right here in FileMaker and stay in FileMaker if you wish. It's up to you. Okay. So now we take a look at this code. What the heck is going on? This looks a bit more complex than the code we've stared at before. And I warned you, didn't I? Mm-hmm. Okay. So with that pasted over there, like I already told you, everything from this line on down, line 28 on down is starting to explain to you kind of what's going on. So let's start here with our first line, which is this line here. And what do I say? What and why? This is the declaration or import of 3 classes, variables, or enums in the PDF library that we want access to. And here's a reference that you can go type in, right? And that takes you to here. So PDF library, that's where we're at. And you'll notice that, well, let's go to Visual Studio Code. Let's look over here on the right. Let me zoom in on that. So this is the line we're interested in. And okay, well, this looks wild, right? We know that this is declaring a variable and we know this is assigning it. We've learned that much in class. We're assigning it to something we haven't seen. Like, where's that described? Well, that is what's made available to us with that library that we've inserted into our web viewer. This calls it. And what this is doing is saying, okay, with this giant library, what do you want to use? Well, I want to use these three things. Well, this one, PDF document, is described right here in documentation. There's a PDF document that we want to have access to. And this is all the properties and methods that you can do on that object. Okay. And I also want to use standard fonts. Well, that's over here somewhere. Standard fonts. There it is. It moved on me as soon as I clicked on it. So there it is. They're highlighted, and here it is over here. So here's a bunch of fonts that we have available to us in this object. So we can use any of these fonts in our PDF editing for free. And then there's actually ways where you can bring in your own fonts, but that's well beyond this course.
Sure, sure.
And the last one we want to use is this object called RGB. Where is that? That's there it is, RGB. And that gives us 4 properties. Okay. So this is saying, hey, import these 3 objects from the library. That's what this is basically saying. And from now on, when we want to use these, this is how we reference them. So if we look over here, ooh, yikes. If we look over here, you can see I'm trying to use the PDF document here. I'm trying to use standard fonts here. Right here, I'm trying to use RGB. So I can't use these in code unless they're defined. And this line at the top is how we define them. We import them from our library. Does that make sense? I think it's kind of straightforward. And this is the syntax of how to do that.
Code to go says enum equals enumerated type equals a custom value list. Is that's on Twitch?
Yeah, that came from this statement right here as far as why I'm doing it. You're importing classes, variables, or enums. So they're probably answering somebody's question as far as, well, what's an enum? So, okay, so that's the first line. Now let's take a look at the next section. And this one's actually multiple lines. So this I'm going to copy and paste over to Visual Code. I'm going to do that over here on the right. And we're going to look at that now. Okay, so this is the code we're going to put in there now. And this looks kind of interesting. And obviously, it's just kind of a boilerplate, right? It doesn't do anything yet, but it will.
Yeah.
This is an arrow function. That should look familiar to you, right? So this line right here should make sense. You've seen this before. Saw it in jQuery, which is the first time you saw an arrow function. So this is saying, oh, create a function. Here's the name, PDF editor underscore create. And we're not going to pass in a parameter. And here's our code block. So when this function gets called, in whatever form or fashion we call it, which we're going to call it from the FileMaker button, right? We already know that. So when it runs, it's going to run everything in this code block. Okay, well, we know that these are comments. So that's just there for organization, for just to pretty things up. Doesn't do a thing. And this is the one line of code. Now, this is actually one line, even though it looks like multiple. That's the one line of code we're going to run. So let's just focus on this. What this is this is calling a function within this function. So this is how it looks to call a function called create PDF that we haven't got in there yet. So this would be synonymous with a perform script in FileMaker. And this would be synonymous with a perform script in FileMaker. And this would be a script calling a script.
Okay.
Makes sense, right?
Sure.
And we're not passing in a parameter. If we wanted to, it'd be inside the parentheses. So then what the heck is this? This is where we start to get some advanced JavaScript really, really fast. So let's move over to W3 Schools. And we are going to be looking at something called a JavaScript promise. Now, what this is this is asynchronous code. You've probably all heard that JavaScript can run asynchronously, right?
Yeah, I remember.
And there's a few things.
360 Works talking about a promise, and we had him on a show. Shoot, this goes back like 3 years, and they were talking about a promise. I can't remember, but it was really cool. And then I never used it after that live stream, right? And now you bring it up, and it's like, we've talked about this in a live stream before, but it goes way back.
So in a nutshell, a promise means I promise a result. That's basically the end result of what a promise is. Okay. It's some code that says, okay, well, I'm expecting a promise and I'm going to sit here and handle the result when it comes. But it can take some time. And when I write the code, I don't know how much time it's going to take. So it's going to shoot off like a subscript. It's going to be running, but it's very similar to perform script on server without waiting for completion. That's asynchronous. And that's you continuing to do what you want to do while that thing runs on the server, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very good example of a FileMaker async process right there, is perform script on server without waiting for completion. Now, if you wait for completion, that's kind of like saying, okay, I want to sit here and wait until you give me a result. Okay. So then you have some code that's going to be consumed once you get the result back. And this, that's kind of described. So that's kind of what we're dealing with, is asynchronous work here. So what this means is, this is saying, okay, this is going to be an asynchronous function that I'm calling. And so this is the code I want you to do when it responds positively. It's done and it's happy, no errors. So if and when that comes back, I want you to run this code block. And what I'm going to pass in is an anonymous function. So as soon as it's done doing whatever it's going to do and I get back a positive response, I want you to run this code immediately. So that part should look familiar to you because we've done that several times, right? An anonymous function that runs immediately. Yeah. So the only thing we've really added here is this whole concept of .then. And we can add some more things besides the .then, and we'll get into it later. But this is kind of your bare minimum as far as, okay, I'm going to call this asynchronous function, and this is the code that's going to run when it's done and it's happy, and then this is all done. Okay, so that's kind of straightforward. So that's what, and we're going to be using that a lot from here on out. So you're going to see this every day for the next 3 or 4 days. So as long as this kind of makes sense and you start to see how it's actually used, then you can always go back to this recording and go back over everything I just said if it doesn't make sense yet. Okay, let's go back to FileMaker and go to the next line. Oh, by the way, our custom function will be called from FMP. Here's a link reference for arrow functions. And that's pretty much all I was explaining there was arrow functions. This is where we start to look at another concept inside the A function itself. Now, if you remember, I'm calling the async function here, but we haven't actually seen that code yet. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about now, is what's inside that create PDF. And because it's an async function, this is what it's going to look like. So let's go plop that into our visual code right here. Okay. Now you see why I have that comment there, is to kind of help separate this visually from the outside function, right? Should make sense.
Absolutely.
So this is a new function that we're calling. We're not going to use an arrow function this time. We're going to call it create PDF with no incoming parameter. And here's the code block that it's going to run. But we're also telling it, oh, by the way, this is going to be async. So from here on out, the compiler knows when it sees async code, oh, okay, yeah, it's valid. So inside the async function is where we're going to have a try catch block. And it's kind of similar to the .then. This is when we're calling it. This is while we're running it. So this it's going to try to do. And if it's successful, it'll pass back out to the then. However, if whatever we're trying to do fails for any reason, it's going to catch the error right here and do this instead of completing whatever it's attempting to do here. So it's going to catch an error and do something here. So this is typically where we handle our error handling, like something like dump it to the console log, you know, some sort of error trigger as far as, hey, you expected a result, but it failed. You might want to know why. Well, this is where you would put that want to know notification, right? But if this runs successfully, then it's going to return something back here. And that returned object, whatever we're returning, can be accessed right inside those parentheses. And you're going to see that here in a moment. So it's kind of complicated, but you can see I'm trying to keep it as simple as feasible. And I don't expect you to be able to sit down after class and be able to type this out and have it work, right? You'll have to use this for reference. But I'm trying to, at least you're being introduced to concept is what you're doing right now. Some advanced concepts. Now, you'll notice over here in FileMaker that I've got quite a few lines of reference material and breakout as far as trying to explain that in a way that I did, that on top of what I just did. Go ahead, Richard.
No, I just think this is having the introduction, getting a video that you can reference and play back, and also having sample files that you can take and hijack and work with until, you know, you break them, then go back and fix them and break them and back and forth. It's
absolutely.
It takes time, but it's an important process, and I think the way we've started this over these days has been really educational and useful. And we
Good.
just didn't jump to the end like, hey, look how bad this stuff is, and you're doing real advanced code that really is, I mean, we wouldn't want
Yeah.
to do this kind of stuff on day one, right? That would,
Right. Absolutely.
yeah, but that happens. People do that, so we have the guys to taper it back and start more simply. So.
Mhm. So to reiterate and kind of showed in the finished code what we were just staring at, here was our first line where we import the stuff from the library. Here's our main parent function, PDFEditor _ create, with its create PDF call down here. And then we're going to have it do something when it successfully gets something back from our function. In this case, we're just going to transfer it all to FileMaker. And here inside of our async function that we're creating here called create PDF, here's our code block that runs. And that's why I have the comments here, is to help break that out and show it visually as something different than this It's kind of a child, and outside of that is the parent, right? So here's our try. This is what it's going to attempt. And if all of that's successful, it's going to return something down here. If it fails, it's going to catch that error here. And if we have an error, then we're going to send that error onto FileMaker and toss it to my script that handles the console. And you've seen that before, and we'll look at it again today. So that's my error handling. If there's an error, dump it to FileMaker's console with an error message, create PDF try failed. Here's the catch with the error code. And I'm using perform script with option number 5. And over in scripts, somewhere down in here, I have the reference material for right here. There's a nope, wrong one. I saw the word options, Claris right here. Options for starting scripts, right? So this is the whole perform script with option. Number 5 is actually, I have it here in the comments, suspend and resume. So any script that's currently running when this comes in is going to be suspended. This script is going to run and that's going to resume. You said you had a class that already covered all that.
We had a live stream that covered it. Yeah, it was a one day where we talked about the 5 different options on that. So it's an interesting concept. Once again, initially it was just a perform script, which did just one of the 5 options, and everyone realized that we really needed 5 different things where it would, it'd interrupt, it would wait to the end. I mean, you try to understand what the possible interactions with 2 scripts trying to run, because FileMaker never really runs 2 scripts simultaneously on the same client. A client is a single threaded process. So what happens when 2 scripts run on top of each other, close to each other, one before the other? Sometimes there's a collision and bad happens. And so you have to think about that. And this script with options gives you control over how the script you're telling it to run, if it waits or it just interrupts everything and aborts everything else, what it does. So anyway.
So we're using that twice here, and here. And I'm using option 5 in both cases. All right, so that kind of shows you that outside async function definition, the try catch inside, the .then outside for when it's returned. So with that, we will move on to the next one. And what is the next one? The next one is right here, our first use of the library. So let me copy that over here, paste that over here, scoot that down a little ways, zoom in on it. Okay, here's our first use of our PDF library. Await means that we know, let's actually go look at this in documentation. So we're going to look at the PDF document object, and we're going to look at a method called create. So go back to here's our document, and create. Where is create? So here's the create documentation. Oh, that's ugly. Let's try it this way. That's better. And look what it returns. It returns a promise. So when we use the create, we know that it's going to be async. So that's why we had to say, hey, await it, because we're going to await the promise. And this is a way to call it with await rather than the .then. So basically at this point, I'm kind of turning my code in. I'm running an async process, but I'm using the option like perform script on server. I want to wait till completion. I don't want to do nothing until it's done. I don't care how long it takes.
But not really asynchronous because you're telling it to wait.
This function is asynchronous, but my code is saying I'm not going to utilize the async capabilities. I'm going to sit here and wait until I get a response.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do nothing until I get that back. I don't care how long it takes. So with that, I just say, okay, well, await this function that returns a promise. So we know this returns a promise. Other than that, this tells me where it's defined in. This tells me that it creates a new PDF document. There are options. So if I click create options, what are the options for creation? Oh, it's like metadata. So I'm going to skip that. That's a little advanced. I think that would create PDF metadata. You know how you can do that in FileMaker? When you save a PDF, you can do things like the author and password and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to ignore that. We're going to ignore metadata for the PDF. Okay. So this, if I zoom back out, that's our one line. Where were we actually using it? We were using it right here inside the try. So this is going to create a new PDF document and store it in our local variable called PDF doc. And this creates a PDF in code, one page, without any options. I think with the options, we can declare size, but we'll do that a little later. I think we'll skip that for now. We'll do sizes later. And I think that is an option we could pass in there. Okay. So since we're not using sizing here, we will use it later for sure. The second line does the same thing we did before. We're going to create a variable. We're going to await a promise. The promise is going to be tied to our PDF document, but now our PDF document has methods and properties, the same ones that we get. That's kind of object-oriented programming, right? You create a document, so you get all of the methods and properties of the parent PDF document. So in documentation back here, my PDF doc has all of these available to it. So I can do things to it now. And what I want to do is I want to embed a font. So that is right. Embed standard font. Embed font right here. That's this method here. And you can pass in standard fonts, which you notice I've done here. And I picked Times Roman. So if we look at standard fonts, that's a link here. Click here. Here's the list of the enumeration values. And Times Roman, this is how you have to spell it. No spacing, camel case. And I've done that right there, right? So this embeds that font into the PDF document. I haven't used it to do anything yet, but this will embed the font. Okay. So that when you open this PDF on any machine, it'll use Times Roman. That's one of the benefits of PDFs, right? You don't have to worry about font substitution.
Yeah, if you embed the font that you need, if you happen to use a font that's not embedded, then it is going to try to do a substitution if it can't find it locally.
Right.
Yeah. But that's mostly deeper than most people know about PDFs. But as professional developers and programmers, it's something that we have to think about.
So then we're going to create a new variable called page. And what we're going to pass into it is we're going to trigger a method on our PDF doc again, and it's called add page. So what does that do? We need to back out to not embed font, but we want to add page. And that does this. It takes some parameters. It takes a couple options that we can pass in as far as page number of what page we want to add. But if you leave it blank, it just adds a page to the end. It depends. Right now we have a 0-page document. So this is going to add 1 page, right? So this is the options for what you can pass in. If it's undefined, which I'm doing, I'm passing in nothing, right here in parentheses. So it's undefined. So what does that do? That creates a new page and add it to the end of the document.
Okay.
Or I could pass in some of these other options and have it add somewhere else. And then down here is an example of using it. So you can kind of see some similarities as far as, ooh, look, here's how they did adding a page of a specific size, A7, and here's letter. So we can look at those options later. Actually, let's see if we can just see it. Add page. If we go here, I don't know how deep we would have to go to actually get the page sizes. So yeah, we'll skip that for now. It's buried in here somewhere. I know I've seen it. Okay, so this adds a page. And then this takes our page and draws some text on it. And this takes several parameters. Matter of fact, it takes, whoops, don't move things. This takes this takes 2 parameters, and the second one is an object. So here's the object. And that object contains the X, the Y, the size, the font, and the color. So now we're going to draw this text in the PDF, and we're giving it some values, and you can put anything in here you want. So in this demo file, be sure to go in and play around with these values and run it so that you can start to explore and take a knife and play around and make changes and see what the results are. Now you'll notice on RGB color that it doesn't take what all of us are used to. Usually we're used to it taking a byte or a number from 0 to 254.
I was going to say 255, but yeah, exactly. Not a decimal.
255. Right, not a decimal. So RGB actually uses decimal values, so 0 to 1. So 0.5 would be the equivalent of what? 120, 124, 126, 126 and a half, 127 and a half, somewhere in there. Half of 255.
Yeah.
Would be 0.5. So you have to do some mental calculation here, and I actually created a tool that will do that. You'll see that later in the class. So yeah, feel free to play around with what this draw text command does. And you notice we're calling that method on our page. And that page we got back from our PDF doc, the new one that's been added. And what does it draw with? Right here, the font is Times Roman font that we've already embedded in the document. And you can pick your size and whatnot. So that should totally make sense to you. And then when it's done, we're going to pass back an async function, because we know that because it says await. And what function are we going to call? Save as base 64. And we're going to say there's an optional data URI true. And what that does is that includes, I wonder if I can find that really fast. Let's see. Save as, let's see if we can find that. It's nicer to see rather than talk about. Base 64 save options, data URI. Come on, no menu, just select it. There we go. Does not describe it very well, does it here? Does it tell you here? Nope, I don't. They're using it here. Oh, this shows you the example. This is what the result looks like without passing back, without putting in the parameter data URI true. All you get back is the base 64 code. If you pass in that optional data URI true, look what it adds for you. Right there.
Well, base 64, and is the other part? Oh, I see. It's just the is the file name in there or anything like that? Because that's one of the things that gets lost with the.
Well, again, this is not a file. This is just PDF data. So what this does is this is what you need in order for a browser to render a PDF document.
Okay.
If you just dump just the data in a browser, all you'll see is the data. You won't render anything. This tells it the data type and that it's base 64 encoded. This is what you can manually type in front of PDF base 64 encoding to render it in a browser. So this function will do it for you if you tell it data URI true, which I've done here. So we know that it's going to return that full base 64 encoding plus this header information so that our browser can render it. It knows what it is. Application PDF base 64 encoded. So when you base 64 something, whether it's a PDF, an image, a sound, there's a MIME type associated with it, right? That tells the browser what it is. So the MIME type might be image/PNG. In this case, it's application/PDF. Those are all MIME types. You can do a Google search for browser MIME types. You'll see the entire list. So if you include that with the data prefix, data colon, that tells the browser, okay, you're going to expect data, not HTML. This is not HTML, but you're doing this in a browser, right? So then you have to tell it the MIME type with a semicolon. Then you tell it which encoding it is, which in this case is base 64. And after that, you include the data. If you put that in a browser, you will get a rendered PDF or image or sound or whatever you've told the MIME type that it is, as long as the encoding is correct and it can decode it. If you just toss the data straight into a web viewer, you'll just see the raw data. It won't convert it. It won't decode it for you. It doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know the MIME type. It doesn't know what you're giving it. This describes what you're giving it. And that's been available in FileMaker probably since version 8.5, because that's standard web browser. You can do that in any web browser. If you can save a file and start it with this, it'll just render it. Yeah, you don't have to actually.
The creation of the base 64 stuff is newer than that, but it's still been around for a while. Really, neat technology. The base 64 thing, it was at the time that I first saw it with Claris, I was like, wow, that is really neat because you could do some amazing things with that. So questions from David Angel. Mikey says he uses it in the web viewer to create QR codes. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
understand
because
how
that's
to.
a finished image. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so back here to the code, if it manages to create a document, embed the font, add a page, draw the text on the page, and await the saving to base 64 encoding, if it does all that successfully, it'll return it right here to our .then. And we can access it right here because it'll pass it to us, and then right here we can call it anything we want. So this point I called it, okay, give me what this function's returning and populate it in my variable called PDF data URI. And what do I do with it? Well, I'm going to, by the way, this is an arrow function for an anonymous function. So this is going to run immediately as soon as then gets it. So as soon as it gets it, I'm going to do what? I'm going to call FileMaker script JS results, and I'm going to pass that entire block to FileMaker, and I'm done. And if you recall in FileMaker what we did with that's here in our JS results script. We pulled the entire thing in and dumped it into the web viewer. And that's the magic that renders this, which is a finished PDF in our web browser.
No, this is good stuff because it's one of these things that people are like, oh, I don't need this today. And then tomorrow, either they work at an organization where they say, hey, we need some PDF manipulation or something like that. And then they're going to be down to like monkey bread or this or something else. It just depends on licensing and strategy and what their fundamental skill sets are, if they're comfortable with JavaScript, etc.
And the real live scenario that I ran into, why I built this in the first place, besides for this class, is two uses. Number one, I've used this library previously in React Native to generate PDFs on the fly on the mobile device that I send the finished result up to FileMaker into a container and use it there. So my mobile device creates a raw PDF in JavaScript code and sends it to FileMaker as a finished result. Then I had a new problem. I had a vendor that was saying, this PDF you're sending us is really nice. What it was actually two pieces. It was an original PDF we were hand scanning and attaching to FileMaker. But then we were automatically adding our own generated invoice from a FileMaker layout. And we were using FileMaker's save as PDF and using the append option to append it to the end of the existing pre-scanned document, right? But the vendor was saying, man, it sure would be nice if you put that invoice in the front. And my first response when they asked that was, sorry, can't do that in FileMaker. And I thought about it for about a half a day, and I came back to the boss and said, hey, you know what? I can probably do that in JavaScript. So I wrote this PDF editor, and that's what it does, right? You can insert a document anywhere in the middle of it. So that was a real life situation that now we use, and now the invoice is in the front, and FileMaker can't do it natively. So
yeah,
now I'm using my PDF editor code to do it.
People see this training and they're like, well, they only want to they got a day job and they're watching this out of the corner of their eye while we're talking and doing this. But then when they get an assignment that dropped on their desk, go do this, then suddenly it's all hands on deck for maximum effort to try to get it done. So, yeah.
So I think that's a good place to stop today because that was drinking from the fire hose. That was a lot of information. From here on out, we're just going to add more detail. We're going to start adding text. We'll add an image. And the code that you saw today over here on the right is going to start to look really familiar because everything we build from here on out is going to be in the same structure. It's going to look like this. The only thing that's going to change is what we're trying to do in the middle. That's it. So once you understand everything else that we've explored today, even if you can't write it yourself, as long as you can basically follow it, you should be able to continue the next few days and not be entirely lost. But this was a lot of information to try to soak in. And don't worry, you're not expected to sit down and actually write this thing with any success, but you have a finished demo file that you can copy and paste and manipulate and tweak and play with. And it works right out of the gate, whether you do anything with code or not.
That's pretty high value. High value, absolutely.
Oh, so right here on the screen is the web inspector on our working web viewer at the top. And there's our JavaScript code sitting in there, and our run button generated this function right here. which starts here, which calls one function internally, create PDF, and that's this one here. And that's an async function that tried and successfully returned a saved base64 encoded result as raw text, passed it in here, we passed it on to FileMaker and tossed it into the web viewer, and voila, it just magically made a PDF for us. So created a PDF in code. Impressive stuff.
Code to Go says I've got PDFs that contain patient information that's confidential, and I have to blank it out for research tasks. Yep, there you go. So far I've been manually converting to a PNG, then drawing on it, hoping this technique will allow me to automate it. So yeah, so let's talk about this hypothetically. You would scan it in somehow, and then you'd want to draw solid rectangles over parts of it. So if you knew where the confidential parts were reliably at, right?
Here's the joy.
Yeah.
Here's the joy of what you just described. You would bring in this PDF editor, and you would load your existing PDF inside this container and hit the green check mark, right? That would give you your PDF here. Now what you do is you navigate to the page that you want to edit. Like let's say right here on position title, you wanted to white that out. So what you would do is you would play around with probably a filled rectangle.
Yep. That's what I'm thinking.
Or something, yeah, a rectangle with no opacity. Make it green or orange or red at first so you can see it, and try your X and Y position and your width and your height, and say, okay, well that's wrong. So you go back and you change your values and you hit, instead of position 145, you put in 145 and rotation 0, and you try it again. And okay, well, where the heck did that go? Right? I mean, you just start trying and playing, and pretty soon you'll get a rectangle right over where you want. Then you change it to white. Then you try it and it's like, okay, I just wiped out the text. Now you know the values to put in your code right here. And suddenly now you know exactly where that thing is. You're using this tool to narrow down your position, your size, your X and Y coordinates. And then in code, you can write the code to do the same thing, and then you can turn that into an automated process.
Now I have a question though. So a lot of when you create PDFs for most people, it depends if I'm talking to like the real senior people here, but if you understand PDFs can contain individual objects, kind of like an XML document, they can also be a scan or a giant image of a document, which makes it larger, etc. But so if you covered over the confidential information and then you saved it out, theoretically that confidential information is still buried under that object, right?
You're placing a white object on top of it. Now, if you send that PDF out to somebody, they could technically still access that information that's hidden in there if they know that it's hidden and if they know where to look. Yeah.
You would have to re-render that PDF, and this is another command, re-render the PDF out, flattened, create an image of it at a high resolution, and almost like rerun it through a scan. So instead of it leaving all those individual objects in there, you flatten it, or whatever the command would be called, to smash it and return it into an image, which would destroy the underlying information, right? So just as a thought in terms of security on that, Code to Go, you probably have thought about this, but if you hadn't, you just want to make sure you don't, hang your too far out over the cliff with this. You'd want to make sure that you would do this, and then you'd go through some sort of process of converting the PDF. Not necessarily you could convert it to a high resolution image like a PNG, then convert it back into PDF, which would also have the net same effect, right? Something like that, or even JPEG, high resolution, whatever. That would take all those objects that are individualized and smash them together. So the Code Go says my stuff is ECG printouts, so different styles and different rotations, but not having to deal with multiple applications will be big plus. Yeah, so you'll have to think that one through, play with it, prototype. But Kyle has a question. I would like to be able to convert HTML as a PDF. I'm curious if there's any way to do that with this editor. Convert it, read a web page, then convert it to a PDF, or PDF to HTML? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I think what he's saying, I'm trying to read between the lines. I think what he means is HTML that needs to be rendered in a browser so that it looks the way you want it to. And then it would be like saving that page as a PDF.
To be able to use rich text editor and save it as PDF.
Whether you could do that with this editor, you probably could, because you can in code, you can render HTML in a web viewer today. That's pretty easy, right? We've already done that in the first day of class. In Hello World #1, we rendered HTML code in a web viewer.
Right.
Then from there to convert that into a PDF. Don't know if you could do that in this editor, because now I don't have a way right now in the editor to take an existing content in a web viewer and load it into a PDF. No, you would have to do a conversion first. You would have to save the rendered HTML as a PDF first. You have to find a tool that would do that. If you can find code that would do that, then you've got a two-stage process in code. Once you have a PDF, you can load it in this editor and do with it what you wish.
Stu says, sounds like a job for the Monkey Bread plugin. Yeah, I would be shocked if the Christian Schmidt can't do that. Although keep in mind, Christian Schmidt leverages the Monkey Bread plugin, which is pretty discounted. The PDF library that he accesses and leverages, there's a couple free things it does, but I think you have to write a check to pay for that library, the license for that library. But if you've got a mission critical application, the customer's paying your time, then yeah, buying the library will be cheaper than actually paying for the developer to code it.
So Peter says he does kind of what we do in this editor. If you're doing it on a layout, if you're generating your PDF from a FileMaker layout, then this is just another way to generate it from code instead. So one or the other should be easy. I don't know about you, but several times in my FileMaker career, I've been asked to take an existing paper form and make it fillable through FileMaker and print it out as a finished form. So that usually requires scanning it usually is ugly because it's all pixelated and not pretty. So typically it's recreating that form in FileMaker using layout tools. This way you keep your resolution because you're not scanning it, right? It would be perfect resolution to just import, open as a PDF, and then then you just have to figure out the X and Y positions and the sizing of your font to place it in the right spot. So it's a little bit different sort of work. But to me, if you had a 50-page legal document that you needed to do, I think this would be the faster, easier way to accomplish that.
Yeah, no. I love it when we take some of your abstract development or training that we're doing and we apply it to real world scenarios. But yeah, as soon as people see how they might use it in real life, it becomes interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Confirm PDF licensing with Monkey. You can confirm it. You want me to confirm it? Code to go. But yeah, there is.
Well, don't forget that MBS, everything with their Dyna PDF that they use, it's kind of, I don't know for a fact, but I get the idea. He's got another developer that does that work. And you have to pay a separate license for that. So you can get MBS without Dyna PDF.
Yeah, you have to write a check for the Dyna PDF, but it does a ton of stuff. So I think
that's a co-op or a partnership that Christian's got.
Yeah, he's got some sort of deal with that, but it solves problems that generally you can't solve any other way. This is interesting. Yeah, if I didn't do, or I wasn't a JavaScript person at all, if I was Kyle Williams, I'd have a choice. I could do it this way, or I could do it with Monkey Bread, right? But if you didn't know anything about JavaScript, you don't want to get into that, then you'd go with the Monkey Bread, probably be one of your few options. It's always good to have more than one tool in your tool chest. If you open your red toolbox and all you have is a hammer, then you're just going to beat the shit out of everything with your one tool. But the goal is to us, right? It's like running around with a hammer, beating the crap out of everything. The goal is to give you a wrench and a pliers and a socket set and all sorts of stuff, right? Yeah, right tool, right job. So we're going to kick it off today. We're done for today. All right, we'll catch everyone tomorrow for another action-packed day of live stream training with Leland Long and JavaScript. So that's it. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Cheerio.
report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!